bit, we want to discuss personal event risk as well as incapacity risk. And, before we started this discussion, I had mentioned don't look at things in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is when you approach your financial plan, it's imperative that you stress test it. And unfortunately, a lot of folks go through their planning process, Brent, and they assume everything's going to be all hunky-dory and rosy, and they don't account for certain what-ifs. And, I think it's imperative that you look at your retirement plan and stress test it and assume that certain things may happen and come up and bite you in the tail.
So like Mark, could I give a quick example here possibly?
Sure.
So if an individual, as an example, is using a pension for their retirement, and one of the things that happens with their pension is if they were to pass away, there's a reduction in payment to the surviving spouse.
Correct.
That would be an example of what you're saying of test a what-if scenario.
Right. That's one of the first, personal event risks that you face is the death of a spouse. Another one might be the death of a child or a loved one. How is that going to impact you? I know that I have a family friend that recently went through this where one of their children is going through a divorce and ultimately has had to move back in with mom and dad along with their kids. And so now they have a 3-generation home, and mom and dad certainly weren't planning on that in retirement. And they're ultimately having to step in and help with their daughters, some of their financial struggles and some of the challenges that they're facing. And unfortunately, I think boomers today are what's known as the sandwich generation. Right. In many ways. They're in a position where they may be having to support their parents, whether it's with health concerns or, many parents are starting to move back into the boomers' households. In addition, they have their children that, in the event that there's, divorce or the loss of a job or anything to that effect. I mean, those are the personal events that you need to think through. What if this happened? What if my kids needed to move in? How is that going to affect me? What if, there was a loss of a job? And Brent, I don't always like to air our dirty laundry here. But
I sent the setup coming.
I have to share, or I have to ask you to share, the story that happened the other day with one of our employees. For those that don't know, our firm owns and operates a few different companies here under our roof. We have a number of employees that work for us and perform various different roles, whether it's on the money management side, whether it's on the brokerage operations side, whether it's some of the technology and that sort of thing. And we had a little incident the other day, and I'd prefer that maybe we don't use the name just to protect the innocent. But this is too good not to share. And this is kind of an example of a personal event risk. I guess it really stresses the importance to me of thoroughly reading paperwork.
All right. So here's the story. Mark's dragging out of me. We had an individual years ago who worked here that is no longer with a firm, and a current individual who does work with a firm, same first names, very similar last names.
Same initial even.
Yeah, yes. So you can see the mistake that I could have easily have made, Mark. It's pretty easy to make this error. So I've received some employment verification within days of each other for both individuals, the past employee as well as the current. Again, same first name, similar last names. You could see an honest mistake of getting those confused. Well, they ended up in the same pile of paperwork for me, same to-do pile on a particular day. One of them was an individual applying for a mortgage, the current employed individual. And without thinking about it, I wrote on the paperwork, no longer employed here.
Was terminated.
It was terminated because I thought it was the other individual. And this particular employed individual had the day off and was running errands, going to the bank, doing the things they need to do to get ready for this home purchase. And their mortgage person had to contact them and say, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but evidently you're no longer employed. So needless to say, the staff was panicking because they thought they uncovered something that they didn't know yet and weren't supposed to know yet. And somebody finally had the courage to come to me and say, hey, did we let so-and-so go? And I said, no, what are you talking about? So long story short, I had to spend about 30 minutes putting this individual's life back together and contacting him and the bank and fixing my mistake. So yes, incorrect paperwork can be an event risk.
It's exactly right. And, I think it tees up perfectly because there's a lot of issues out there And this is kind of one of those event risks, but where beneficiary forms aren't filled out properly.
That's right. It's a significant challenge.
And, when somebody passes away, the first thing that they're going to look at in terms of where that money is going to go and how that money is going to pass on is going to be the beneficiary form. And there are countless examples of beneficiary forms being incorrect, being lost. And so that's something that we strongly encourage all of you to just do a beneficiary audit. Take all of your accounts, get all of them in order, and do a beneficiary audit. In fact, we've put together a report that's available on financialhq.com that you can download that details 4 of the biggest common beneficiary mistakes that are made.
That's right, Mark. Brent Enders and Mark Mersman here in America's Financial Headquarters, talking about personal or event risk. Mark, that's a great offer and a good recommendation to go secure the 4 common beneficiary mistakes report on financialhq.com.
One of the things too, Brent, that I think is imperative that you do, anytime there's any sort of significant change in your life, sit down with an advisor. Now, we encourage you, if you don't have an advisor or you're looking for a second opinion and want to have some of these discussions, to reach out to one of the Financial HQ Network advisors. You can contact us at 888-888-9572 or visit online at financialhq.com. But anytime there is a personal or family event that happens, whether it's a birth or a death in the family, whether there's an upcoming marriage or divorce, and I encourage before the divorce, you have to sit down and address certain things because money's going to move, things are going to happen, and you want to have your affairs in order well in advance of anything like that taking place. Some of the other items might be a change in a child's college plans, change in your health status or your medical needs, whether you're about to approach the decision about applying for Social Security, whether you're planning to move into a retirement community, whether estate planning issues may change. A big one, whether you're going to inherit money or other assets.
Sure.
Take the time to plan for certain things in advance of that. Don't wait to get the money and then decide, well, what are we going to do? How do we handle this? Because especially in the case of certain types of accounts, there may be tax advantages that you can take advantage of in advance of you inheriting that money.
That's right. And Mark, you just touched there on one of our other risks that we were going to talk about today, and that is incapacity risk. You mentioned the change of health, medical issues, and that is a very significant risk facing one's retirement plan.
That's right.
And it's another example, I believe, of what you mentioned of stress testing your plan, because unfortunately, the medical issues oftentimes are not foreseen in advance. It's hard to plan for them. It's hard to know when they're going to come. But again, you should sometimes assume that those issues are going to arise, and you need to plan for that. So if an individual was to experience some kind of catastrophic illness unexpectedly, maybe they had to quit their job because they could no longer work. Do they have disability coverage there? If they're already retired and experience some significant health problems, would they have to go into a nursing home? And what do those costs do to their retirement plan? So, an event risk can also be an incapacity risk. They're incapacitated, can no longer work or take care of themselves and do some of the things they used to do.
One of the things, Brent, that we always encourage people to ask, think about this. If you're married and tomorrow morning you woke up and your spouse was no longer able to communicate with you. Now, some of you may look at that and say, well, that's today.
That's an ongoing event risk for me.
But, in the event that happens, how is it that you're going to tackle, paying the concern, the issues that you may have and be facing for long-term care? More importantly, how is it that you're going to handle your financial affairs? It's one of the reasons why a lot of our Financial HQ Network advisors will employ an adopt a client program, which in essence is, if the husband, for example, in this case is a do-it-yourselfer and wants to handle all things, and the wife in this example, and it's not always that way, but the wife in this example, just kind of lets the husband manage it. If the husband's gone tomorrow or not able to communicate, our advisors will kind of take on an adopt a client program so that the husband and him can have that conversation to understand and make sure that the wife in that example is well taken care of.